Kaotic Motorsports Radio, presented by Burris, is on the air. 60 minutes of nonstop racing talk we'll bring to you throughout this hour. We're going to be talking with Indy cars, F1, NASCAR, NHRA, some local racing action, upcoming events for the weekend, and our race picks for a big race weekend as we head into the Memorial Day weekend. Hi, everybody. JR Ybarra sitting in for Chappie Chapman for the entire 60 minutes. If you would like to chime in, you can also give us a call at 909-360-8330. We're also going to be talking to a special guest coming up at the bottom of the hour to talk about the California Lightning Splints coming up at Paris Auto Speedway this coming weekend. But as usual, the big weekend...
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Yeah, it is that most wonderful time of the year for the Indy 500 to come our way. It is a race that most of us have watched as a child. Boy, I have been watching the Indy 500 probably since the 1970s. Actually, I take that back, since the 1960s. Just to give you an idea of how old yours truly is. I can remember way back when watching the Indy 500 from a closed-circuit television feed in a movie theater in downtown Los Angeles. My dad took my brothers and I back in the day to watch the 1968 running of the Indianapolis 500, and Bobby Unser winning that race. And it was a unique way to watch racing live at the time because ABC Sports hadn't totally kicked into gear with a live feed. It was all tape delayed back in that day, and it was the first and only way that you could watch the Indy 500 live from a video standpoint, and it was pretty cool to watch it on a big screen, so it was pretty unique back in the time to watch the Indy 500. So it's a race that I have really loved all these years, and now we're seeing some really significant changes to the 500. One of those big changes is the speed. 230 miles an hour was the speed of the weekend here. In fact, 231, 232 wound up being on the pole with Scott Dixon. So we really have some fast racing action in store for us here for this Indy 500 for the 101st running. Scott Dixon on the pole. He did that last time he won his first Indy 500 back in 2008. So I would imagine he can be an odds-on favorite to come away as a champion here for the 101st running. I'll give you my pick a little bit later on. If you'd like to tell us your pick, once again, join us at 909-360-8330. And give us your pick for this year's Indy 500. A lot of other significant things happening with the Indy 500 this year, that being some new entries that we hadn't seen before, some reemergence of some teams, and maybe a little bit of little backpedaling here by Penske Racing. I think a lot of people were expecting Penske Racing to be at the top of the heap. They've kind of struggled ever so slightly with both Will Power, Helio Castroneves, Joseph Newgarden, to name a few of their drivers who maybe didn't qualify quite as well as they had expected. So Scott Dixon, as we said, is on the pole, and he's the one that is probably the driver to beat. But one of the key stories for this year's Indy 500 is Fernando Alonso, the F1 two-time world champion, dropping himself into an IndyCar for the very first time in his career. And man, he has been impressive. Driving over 230 miles an hour in qualifying. I think his abilities have really shown up in an open wheel car. Even though he'd never been in IndyCar for the first time, he'd never been to an oval, and he'd never seen the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in his entire career as far as driving it for the first time. So the fact that he's going to be starting from the middle of row 2 makes him a very legitimate contender to win this year's race. I think there is a very strong possibility that you could see Fernando light it up and come away with a victory. He is associated with Andretti Autosports for this particular race, so you got to imagine that his abilities to possibly come up with a top 10, top 5 is very strong for this year's running of the 101st Indy 500. So I would say that most likely his capabilities to win this race are very strong. You got to wonder also, you can see how Fernando has really enjoyed his time at the 500, spending a lot of time in practice, getting a lot of advice from his teammates there with Andretti Autosports. And I got to believe that he's far from that F1 situation that he's with McLaren, where he's kind of a mid-pack runner throughout this season so far. So I would imagine that he's licking his chops to see the possibility of coming up with a podium here with his first time at the Indy 500. Other significant names I think you got to take note of. Marco Andretti had a fairly good qualifying speed as well. Again, he's one driver I think he's been a little underperforming through his better part of his career, but the fact that he's been joined up this year with Brian Herta doing his strategy up on the box, I think that's been a significant change for his career, has helped him to run a little bit better in qualifying and in the racing action, although has yet to score a really significant podium as of yet. But I would imagine his capabilities would make him a strong contender to possibly win the 500 as well. We've also seen the return of Juan Pablo Montoya, so I would imagine his capabilities as well could be very significant to come up with his third possibly victory in the Indy 500. Other significant names you got to take a look at. Takuma Sato is one who also qualified fairly well. You also see the likes of Ryan Hunter-Reay, who's in row 4, along with Ed Jones and Oriol Servia. But I would imagine your winner is going to come within that first 3 rows of your starting lineup. So take a look at who your pick might be. I'm going to venture to say that Scott Dixon is very likely the strongest contender. Although if I were to give a sentimental favorite for myself, I would definitely go with Fernando Alonso to try to come up with a victory, his very first in his Indy 500 debut. Qualifying was again really hot and heavy, with speeds once again reaching that 230 mile an hour mark in many cases with many drivers. When you look at the list of names who made it up that average, you have the likes of Ed Jones, Max Chilton, Graham Rahal, just to name a few. But one unfortunate fact, Sebastian Bourdais on a very hot qualifying attempt, well up above 232, crashes out of just turn 2 and winds up knocking himself out of the race and unfortunately out of the season as well. So Sebastian Bourdais fractured a hip. He will be out of this race, and unfortunately looks like he will be out for the entire rest of the season. That leads us into a really interesting scenario, though. 33 cars usually make up the Indy 500, and they really barely made that as far as the number of entries this year. So it looks like the final entry will be taken up by Sebastian Bourdais' entry, but nonetheless, there will be a different driver that will be part of that team. And taking a look at some of the practice runs out of yesterday's practice session, Max Chilton wound up being on top at 228 miles an hour, followed by Ed Jones and Scott Dixon. So it's interesting to note that Max Chilton and Ed Jones, who did not qualify all that far up the charts, wound up being at the top of the heap in their practice session on Monday afternoon. There's going to be one more practice session on Friday, always known as Carb Day, a final tune-up to the race that'll lead up to Sunday's big festivities. So that will be the final practice time that each of these drivers will have a chance and opportunity to light it up on the racetrack. So who would your pick be? There's a great host of racers that I think we're going to see come away with a possibility of winning. Heck, we haven't mentioned Alexander Rossi. He was last year's winner as a rookie driving for Andretti Autosports, and I would be safe to say that his possible win for a second time is very realistic at this point. Marco Andretti is another possibility, as we mentioned, and you still have to bring into play the Penske racers of Will Power, Helio Castroneves, as well as the likes of Joseph Newgarden, who did not practice very well yesterday, wound up being 22nd on the speed charts. But nonetheless, it isn't about the top speed as it is getting yourselves in a strategy and a rhythm to get yourself through 500 miles. So the Indy 500 coming up on its 101st weekend of racing for that big race. And I know eyeballs from around the globe will be watching, very likely to see how Fernando Alonso will do. And you got to imagine, though, what would happen if Fernando wins this race? Would he really spark and maybe encourage some of the other F1 drivers to kind of follow suit? You know, not since the 1960s have we seen a whole barrage of F1 drivers head on over to Indianapolis to try to give themselves the ability to win that big race. But I got to imagine if Fernando Alonso comes up with a podium and if he wins this race, who knows? Will we see the likes of Lewis Hamilton and some others try to wind up someday in the Indy 500? So give us a pick. We'd like to hear about it. Now we make the transition to Formula One. That winds up being a very big weekend for them as well. The Monaco Grand Prix, it's one of the crown jewels in all of F1. And you got to believe that a lot of drivers that have been contending for the championship, that being Lewis Hamilton, have been looking forward to this particular race in order to see that they can continue to battle for that championship along with Sebastian Vettel. Right now, when you look at points, Sebastian Vettel, top of the heap at 104, and Lewis Hamilton at 98 points. A very tight battle between those two racers. Valtteri Bottas in third at 63 points, and Kimi Räikkönen fourth at 49 points. So the big battle, though, is between Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton battling it out for the F1 championship. In constructors' points, it is a different story, though. Taking a look at that, it is Mercedes leading that race at 161 points, followed by Ferrari and Red Bull in your top three. So the Monaco Grand Prix, always a spectacular event. Lewis Hamilton looking to add another one to his win box with that particular race. And like I say, I got to imagine that a few of those racers in the F1 ranks are looking to try to maybe scope out what Fernando does this coming weekend at the Indy 500. And who knows, you know, now that F1 is an American-owned entity with Liberty Media taking on the ownership role from Bernie Ecclestone, you got to imagine if sometime down the road, if F1 might make a few changes to the schedule and give the opportunity to the F1 drivers to come over to Indy and battle in the Indy 500. A possible thought. You know, it would be something to see a lot of those F1 drivers get that opportunity, and I would love to see that as an F1 fan myself. So you got to see that that possibility is coming down the road. You know, it kind of leads me to a time back in the day, back in the 70s, when F1 drivers and Indy drivers competed really not too far from here. Ontario Motor Speedway was just down the block from our studios here with Chaotic Radio, and OMS back in the day ran a very unique race with F1 cars and Formula A or Formula 5000 back in the day. So you had the combination of F1 drivers such as Jackie Stewart, Graham Hill, to name a few, were on hand here locally at Ontario Motor Speedway, battling it out with the likes of Bobby Unser and also Mario Andretti, AJ Foyt, and a few of those familiar names from the IndyCar ranks. It was a unique time back in that day because the cars were not that evenly paired with each other. The F1 cars were really much more dominant than the Formula A or Formula 5000s back in that day. So it really posed a very unique race. It was run only one time. It was known as the Questor Grand Prix. So if you ever want to take a look at some racing history and do a bit of a Google search or a search on YouTube and Google Questor, Q-U-E-S-T-O-R, Grand Prix, and take a look at some of the racing action. It was quite a unique battle for the infield. Essentially, they were going clockwise against the oval, part of the oval, going into an infield road race circuit, which was quite fast from what a lot of racers would comment on. And it was a very unique battle amongst F1 drivers, along with those from the IndyCar and sports car ranks here from American racing. So it'll be interesting to see, once again, that F1 crowd that's in Monaco. I'm sure we'll be checking out Fernando Alonso there at the Indy 500 to say, hey, maybe we can do that somewhere down the road. So we'll keep an eye on that. As far as the Monaco Grand Prix, if I were to give myself a pick for that race, you know what? I'm going to say Sebastian Vettel is very likely the guy who's going to sit on top of the podium. Ferrari has been super strong this year, and I would think that they'll once again have another great racing weekend. Kimi Räikkönen also as well has done fairly well in qualifying, hasn't quite brought it in the race so far. And I would venture to say that Kimi kind of needs to keep himself close to the podium as well as maybe score a win or two before the season is over if he wants to maintain that ride with Ferrari. Kimi Räikkönen, a very popular racer amongst F1 fans, kind of the second car, if you will, in the Ferrari stable, currently running fourth in points. Switching gears now to the world of NASCAR. Big news this afternoon as there's a big change to the schedule for NASCAR. The NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series will be heading into Charlotte. Actually, they've been in Charlotte over the past couple of weeks, having run the All-Star race, won by Kyle Busch. Kind of a runaway race, if you will, for those of you who watch Saturday night's events. I got to tell you, there's been a little bit of a criticism about Charlotte Motor Speedway and its lack of ability to have side-by-side racing. It's only kind of a one-groove racetrack, and I think it kind of proved itself out as Kyle Larson won the first two segments of that race, kind of handily, if you will, and then Kyle Busch winning the third and final segment, the overall race win, kind of running away from the rest of the pack. Didn't provide much of an exciting race to watch from a NASCAR standpoint, other than some of the jostling that was going back from second place on back. But as we now head and look towards the 2018 season already, NASCAR has made a huge announcement this afternoon, in fact, about some different changes that will take place in the schedule. What we're seeing in terms of what will be jostled around for 2018 is that the Daytona 500 will be back on President's Day weekend, which will be February 18th in 2018. And that will give the opportunity to maybe have a rain date, if you will, because it being President's Day weekend. If for some reason rain becomes an issue on that Sunday, you have Monday to race and complete that 500-miler. You're also going to see Richmond International Raceway will be a host of a playoff race for the 2018 playoff. Previous to that, the Richmond race has been the lead-up race, the cutoff race, if you will, to determine the final field that would head into the playoffs. But now Richmond will be part of that playoff race as well. You're also going to see a change where the Indianapolis Motor Speedway date is going to be moved to September the 9th. Won't be in the middle of summer and won't be a hot, heavy time that it's been over the past couple of years. The crowds have really kind of dwindled at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I think part of it is the fact that it's been run during the summertime, and you've had a lot of crowd dwindle over the past few years, and quite frankly, from a NASCAR marketing standpoint, it has not looked very good to see all those empty seats at IMS, and now I think they're trying to change things around by switching it over, sending it to a September 9th date. Another aspect that we're going to see is Chicagoland Speedway will be the site where NBC Sports will take over the coverage. That'll start in July 1st of 2018. Prior to that, it was Daytona with the Firecracker 400. That was the race where the transition took place, where it went from Fox to NBC. So now it will be Chicagoland being that transitional date there for that part of the season. Another shakeup that we're going to see, and this was already a known factor, that Las Vegas Motor Speedway was going to add a second date and will be the kickoff race to the NASCAR playoffs, and that will be September the 16th. So Las Vegas, 2 dates. I think that's a very good choice on the schedule that we're going to see. That's always been a race that has drawn a lot of attention and a lot of attendance, and I think we'll see a pretty good amount of people in the grandstands, especially it being the first race of the playoff for 2018. Now, here's a huge change. Charlotte Motor Speedway, the playoff race, that'll be in the fall, will become a road course race. Yeah, you heard me right. It will be a road course race. For those of you who are not aware, Charlotte Motor Speedway has an infield road course that apparently the SMI folks, Speedway Motorsports, have been working on over the past year, getting it ready for the possibility of running a cup race there, and now it's officially on the schedule. So from what I understand, it will be kind of what you call a roval situation, where you're going to see the racers utilize turns 3 and 4, come down the main straightaway, then make a sharp right-hand turn, a sharp left-hand turn. A sharp right-hand will take you into the wall. A sharp left-hand turn that'll take you down into the infield. I haven't seen the rest of the configuration, but it looks to be the type of road course that you've seen over at Daytona Speedway, and that will be an interesting aspect. That will be part of the Charlotte race in the fall. And once again, it will be part of the playoffs as well. You're also going to see, as we mentioned, that the short tracks will come into play, with Richmond being part of the playoffs. So it will be a nice variety as we get to the playoffs in 2018, where you're going to have the aspects of those 1.5 mile races, the big race, the big speedways, such as Talladega. You'll see a road course now at Charlotte. And then the remaining action will pretty much stay the same, as you'll see the likes of Phoenix, you'll see the likes of Homestead into the action, and that will comprise the 2018 playoff season for NASCAR. So, interesting changes, good or bad. Got to hear it from you fans out there. I have a feeling that NASCAR is really trying to shake up things, mainly because, once again, TV ratings have been a little lackluster. The amount of people in the grandstands has also been a factor as well, to try to regain some excitement among a general crowd and really mix it up a bit to see if they can really kind of recapture some of that market share they had back in the day, when it was really a hot selling ticket to go to a NASCAR race. Not quite the same thrill and excitement that is provided for race fans, and even for the casual race fans that have followed NASCAR over the past few years. So the 2018 schedule is now out. You go to NASCAR.com, check it out for yourself. You can see all the different changes that have taken place or will take place for the 2018 season. Switching gears now to NHRA, big speeds over at Topeka, Kansas. Huge, monstrous speeds in the funny car division, where Matt Hagan went 338 miles an hour in qualifying. Can you believe that? 338 miles an hour in qualifying. So you got to believe that Matt Hagan will be a strong contender for the rest of the season. As we take a quick look at some of the point standings, let's take a look at Top Fuel. Leah Pritchett still on top, followed by Steve Torrance, who had another great weekend. Antron Brown, who wound up winning at Topeka, is really standing only a couple of rounds of racing behind your leader, Leah Pritchett. Tony Schumacher running fourth, followed by Doug Coletta in that fifth spot. Taking a look at funny car points, you got to believe that the hot and heavy Ron Capps is wanting to grab a second championship. He wins his fourth race in a row by winning at Topeka, and he is currently a points leader, followed by Matt Hagan, who ran that monstrous 338 mile an hour in qualifying, followed by John Force, Robert Height, and Jack Beckman, rounding out your top five. So Ron Capps really on a tear, winning 4 races in a row in the NHRA ranks. We're getting ready to step aside for a break. We're going to talk some more racing, talk about some local racing action. We're going to bring on a special guest to talk about the California Lightning Sprints, which will be at Paris Auto Speedway this coming Saturday. And you're hearing it all here with Kaotic Motorsports Radio, brought to you by Burris.
From here, baby, and I don't care where I'm going.
Kaotic Motorsports Radio is back on the air. JR Ybarra filling in for Chappie. Chap will be back with us in action here next coming Tuesday. Got a special guest coming up in just a few moments with Jared Kramer. We'll talk to him in just a bit, talking about his upcoming race at Paris Auto Speedway. I know we were on tap to talk to Bobby McNovich, but Bobby had some family things he had to take care of, and we'll catch up with Bobby somewhere down the road. Before we get into some of the good things about racing, unfortunately, there was a couple of bad things that happened over the weekend. One of the biggest stories in motorsports right now is the passing of Nicky Hayden, former MotoGP champion, who tragically lost his life as a result of being hit by a car while training on a bicycle. So it's really sad news to hear such a huge champion. He was trying to really get back into the aspect of running in the Superbike World Superbike Series. And Nicky Hayden, a tremendous champion from 2006 as MotoGP champion, one of the few American champs in the two-wheel ranks, unfortunately loses his life as a result of training for the World Superbike on a bicycle nonetheless. Unfortunately hit by a car. So all you bicyclists out there, I know I'm one as well, always be careful when you're out and about on the road. You never know with such distracted driving out nowadays. Also, we lost Jim Mcilrath, a former IndyCar racer, sprint car racer, back from the 60s and 70s. Jim passed away at the age of 89, I believe it is. Mcilrath, also a big factor, again, locally here from Ontario Motor Speedway, winning the very first California 500 back in the day. In fact, I was at that race back in 1970, just to kind of give you a clue as to how old yours truly is. So Jim Mcilrath, a very large name in the USAC ranks. He is also one who endured some tragedy in his life. Unfortunately, his son James was killed in a sprint car race back in the 70s, and also his daughter was unfortunately killed in a plane accident back in the day. So he's a man who endured a whole lot of sorrow in his life. He was able to live a very full life and have a very good career in the USAC racing action. So our thoughts and prayers with the Mcilrath family as well as the Haydens, mourning the loss of two really great racers. Turning and switching gears now, Memorial Day weekend is not only a time where we take a look at the Indy 500, at the Coke 600, but it's also some time for some localized racing as well. That will take place this coming weekend at Paris Auto Speedway, where we will have the Salute to Indy with sprint car action. It will include the likes of the USAC CRA series, as well as the the senior sprints, and the Young Gun sprint cars, and it will also include the likes of the California Lightning sprint cars. And Jared Kramer, the current points leader, is joining us to talk about that. Hey, Jared, you with us? Jared Kramer, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Jared, great to have you along with us here on Kaotic Motorsports. Thanks for joining us. Jared, for those people who are unaware what a Lightning sprint is all about, can you describe what type of race car that is?
Well, basically, a Lightning Sprint is a modified midget converted over to run chain through a street bike motor, 1000s to about 1250 cc, and we also run top wings and front wings.
So it looks a lot like a World of Outlaw car, except on a mini scale.
Yeah, exactly. With running the wings and everything, you get a lot more downforce with it. In the chain also, it gives you a little bit more drive off your left rear tire also. So it's similar. It looks exactly like a World of Outlaw, like you said, just on a smaller scale.
Now, Jared, you've been with the series for quite a while, and I understand that you've had some pretty good success. Tell us about your career in the California Lightning Sprint Series.
Well, I've been racing California Lightning Sprints now for about 13 years, going on my 13th year, and I started in 2004. That year, I won the Rookie of the Year title, and then competed competitively for the next 4 or 5 years, and then in 2010, I was able to win the championship. And then we came back 2011 to try to back it up to be one of the only ones to, the second driver to to win back-to-back titles, and we ended up getting second that year. So after that, I took a little bit of time off. I had my daughter. She was born in 2012, so I ran a partial schedule, and then now we're back to compete fully in 2017.
Now, looking at the schedule, what's really unique about the California Lightning Sprints, you guys travel up and down the state, primarily here in Southern California, but you do venture up to Northern California. So I think for yourself as a racer, that's got to pose a challenge, as well as some excitement to have a variety of racetracks that you visit in a season's time.
Oh, yeah, I believe this year we're going to get to run 9 tracks, going all the way up to Chico and Placerville in Northern California. It makes a better driver, a diverse driver out of you, getting used to these different tracks that we're running on, because not every track is the same. So, especially for the young drivers coming up in our club that are 14, 15, 16 years old, like Aiden Lang, Eric Greco, and Dominic Del Monte, and also Wyatt Downing. It gives these kids a chance to grow and become a better driver if they want to move up into different classes.
Is there a favorite track that you prefer in the schedule?
Right now, for a long time, my favorite track's been Bakersfield. The reason why I like Bakersfield is because it's in people's backyards. It's it's backyard racing. It's hometown racing, and they draw pretty good crowds there, and people are always friendly to us, and that's why I like that track.
What's nice, like you mentioned, with all the different configurations, you guys are running a big track this weekend, but you've also had the smaller tracks like Ventura Raceway and some of the others. So obviously it means pose a challenge for your crew and your crew chief to kind of keep things working at whatever kind of configuration you're running at.
Oh yeah, definitely. My crew chief, Leighton Kramer, he puts in a lot of man hours in the garage. Also, on telephones, chasing down parts and everything to keep my car in tip-top shape. We, going the high speeds that we're going on in this half-mile track, you want to make sure, everything is working, especially in the steering and suspension, because, one wrong move, you're going for a ride.
Now, I understand this is a family operation for you. Your dad is heavily involved. Your brother's involved. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we our racing is called Kramer Brothers Racing. It's my dad and his brothers, and me and my brother Seth Kramer, and my cousins Donnie and Leighton Kramer. We've been part of the racing, since we were born. So the cars we got are my dad does a lot of work on them, a lot of fabrication on them. We run Hinchcraft chassis from Rick Hinch in Pennsylvania, which is now ran out of EMI Eagle Motorsports out of Nebraska. And my dad does a lot of the fabrication on them, like if they get bent or if they get wrecked and he has to work on them. He cuts them up. He can make them better, not necessarily better, but, he puts them back to where they can perform again.
Yeah, so obviously for a family operation like yours, it's great to have the help from Dad and the brother to make that all happen. Who are some of the sponsors and some of the people who have backed you during this season that you'd like to give a shout out to?
First and foremost, my wife, Lorena. I'm glad she sticks with me to help me, and let me pursue my, passion for racing. Without her, I don't think I would be doing this. And, obviously my mom and dad, my cousin Leighton, my crew chief. And then I'd like to thank Local Vape Distribution, Malicious Liquids, and Anarchist Manufacturing, Erica Harley and Justin Pierce. They, been helping me out a lot this year to get me to run a full schedule. My dad also is BK Wings. He makes our wings and some of the other people in the club. Black Rhino Performance, UTV, Sunset Signs, Don Gould Motors, FJR, and EMI. They've been backing us and giving us a lot of props and shout-outs this year, helping us along the way.
Yeah, just like any type of racing, you got to have those backers, those sponsors, the family members. Obviously, the racing wife is a big one as well. So that's always a huge plus. It's great to hear that. Let's talk again about the cars themselves. As we said, they are kind of a miniature version of a sprint car. Tell us the difference in costs in terms of campaigning a mini sprint versus a full-on wing sprint car. I'm sure there's quite a difference there.
Yeah, there's quite a big difference in mainly the motor packages. If you want to have a competitive 410 sprint car, you're spending anywhere from 30 to 50 grand, which you can buy a turnkey Lightning Sprint for about 25. So some of the parts they break, like radius rods and shocks and all that stuff, they're pretty much the same price on full size and mini sprint, and the tires are a little bit different in cost, but other than that, it's just mainly the motors. Everything else is pretty much the same.
And that's a pretty huge plus. Obviously, if you're running a 360 or 410 sprint car, man, the price tag on those engines gets pretty outrageous. So to only spend, as you mentioned, $3,000 for a motor that will last you hopefully an entire season has got to be a pretty good difference in the way the racing budget goes. Now can you do much modification to the engine, or is it pretty much a stock motorcycle engine?
It's supposed to be a stock motorcycle engine straight out of the bike. I mean, you can go through and you can check it out. If you need to do a head gasket, you're allowed to deck the head a little bit. You got a certain rule on that, but mainly it's just you could. It's got to be stock pretty much. You could do a little bit to the tranny. You can run cam gears. But overall, it's got to be stock.
Are you guys running gas or methanol in the car?
In my car, we're running methanol, but you're allowed to run gas, racing fuel, and in our club, you're also allowed to run pump gas for some of the guys that have a smaller budget.
Is there any, for those who run the pump gas, is there any difference in the car's way, or is it all pretty much everybody's running whatever fuel they prefer, and it's just everybody's the same weight and same specs? In our club, if you run pump gas, you're allowed to run I think 20 pounds lighter than the normal. You're allowed to weigh 925 on pump gas. I believe it's 945 with a 1,000 engine, and with a 1,200 cc, I think you got to weigh 1,015 pounds. So to me, that's great. The fact that the club is really looking out for the racer, making sure that for those who can't spend money on racing gas and methanol, which is really quite expensive when you start adding things up, it's not a bad deal if you can get away with running 91 octane through the motor and save yourself a few bucks on a race weekend. Now, another aspect that's happening to your series this year is now you guys have an association with USAC and a national championship series. Explain what's that all about for you drivers.
Well, a couple of years ago, I believe Levi Jones got a hold of Bob McNovich because they know each other, and Levi Jones is running the operations behind USAC. They sat down and talked with some of the other presidents across the country, like Andy Bradley out of Indiana, who runs Hoosier Speed Cars, and I believe Troy Allery out of Colorado. So what they did is they put together a series for all our clubs across the country. They can race our own local series and have a point system that you get to race against the top guys in the other series across the country. Even though you don't race against each other, you are in a point series. And what it does is puts everybody on the same playing field as a rule book, as a point structure, and that if you want to go over to these guys over there to their clubs and run, that you don't have to worry about changing tires or changing weight or anything like that. And it puts a more of like a national aspect on it. And you race against guys you normally don't get to race against, even though you're not racing against them. And hopefully in the future they'll put one race, a national series, where everybody, the top guys in each club or series will race it out and battle for a championship at one race.
I think that's. Go ahead.
So it puts more of a national feel for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just think that's such a great idea that, you get to run your normal schedule locally, but a few of those races are going to count towards a national title. And so that will really make it a very great incentive for somebody like yourself that is essentially possibly contending for a national championship now.
Yeah, exactly. And then not only that, at the end of the year they'll have the banquet, and you get to go to the USAC National Banquet. I believe it's in Indiana, where you sit down with all USAC's the national series for the 410s, the midget drivers, and all them guys. And you get to rub elbows with some of the greats you see on TV. So I think it's pretty cool. Man,
that is a cool thing. It's great to see that USAC has kind of stepped up and really kind of acknowledged you guys in the mini sprint, lightning sprint division. Because I think it's been kind of ignored, put on the back burner. Nobody's really paid attention to it over the past, few decades, if you will. And now you guys are essentially being part of a nationally known organization. And like we mentioned, possibly running for a national title now.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that when it comes down to it, Lightning Sprint's been around for 20 plus years, and it's not, not necessarily me but we've built this club up and the racing all across the world, in Australia and New Zealand, and I just think that they're a little scared of USAC just coming in and saying, you know, hey, this is our thing, you know. So, but now that everybody sat down and seen that, hey, this is good for our sport, this is good for our clubs, and this is good for the association and the type of cars we drive, that put us out there like that. So it's I'm very thankful for it, and I'm very glad to be a part of it.
Awesome. Now, in addition to the National Series, I know you guys also have what's called a Civil War Series with the Northern California Racers and the BCRA. You guys have already visited tracks in Northern California, Chico and Placerville, which is pretty well known for the winged sprint cars, the 360s and the 410s. So it's a great opportunity for you guys to kind of mix it up with the Northern California Racers as well.
Oh yeah, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and since I was younger, I remember, you know, racing against them in the early years, 2004, 2005, and it's been really taken off the last couple of years. And mainly, they used to come down and race our tracks, and then this year we've actually decided, you know, hey, we're going to come up and race in your ballpark, you know, now. So and just put racing on a whole different level for Southern California against Northern California, because they got stars up there like we got down here, like Craig Dillard and Kyle Oldfield, which moved up. And then, you know, we got Hunter Kinney up there now, who's running fast, and Dakota Albright. These guys all come down here and race with us and won races. Now that we went on their racetracks, it's a whole different, you know, they're racing stuff they're used to, you know, and they showed us how to get around up there for sure.
Now, this type of division, California Lightning Sprints, I'm sure has been kind of a stepping stone for some racers. Is it your goal to try to move up someday, or are you content to stay with this? Obviously, budget constraints are probably a factor to try to move up the ranks. So what is it like for you looking towards the future in your career?
My younger years, that was definitely a goal, you know, to try to move up, you know, and it's kind of hard just based on talent to try to do it. And I believe, you know, I had a rough attitude a while ago, so I think that was kind of holding me back. But I mean, we always want to move up to something bigger and better and faster, as you know, as a race car driver. But you know, as of now, you know, if it comes, they say, hey, you know, you want to drive my car, I'm there for it. But I mean, I'll leave it to the younger kids, because that's what they want.
And you've had a few racers from the California Lightning Sprints move up into the sprint car midget ranks, I've seen over the past few years.
Oh, yeah. Mike Spencer, 5-time USAC CRA champion. You got Darren Hagen, who was a midget champion and also raced sprint cars. Josh Wise, he's raced a Lightning Sprint. You know, there's some heavy hitters that moved up that are now, you know, racing in the big ranks.
So it's really been a good training ground for a lot of those racers, and I'm sure just the aspect that you're in an open wheel car, you're on dirt, you're really kind of getting that same aspect of racing along the likes of sprint cars and midgets, especially coming up on this weekend here at Paris Auto Speedway. Talk about Paris. It is a big racetrack. You guys really carry a lot of speed at this track. You know, some of your lap times are kind of rivaling a 360 sprint car. Talk about this racetrack and this coming weekend's event.
It's a big track for sure. It's wide open. You know, there's a lot of room to move around, a lot of lines to study. We're carrying speeds from like 110 to 112, entering in turn 1 and turn 3. We probably run an average speed of 99 miles an hour. It's a good learning track for these kids that are coming up, because they get to feel the real speeds of these cars. Because we are turning fast laps. We're turning low 17 seconds. And I believe one year I would have qualified 5th for the 410 non-wing show.
Wow.
It was a fast track that night. And Bobby McNovich, which is our club president, he holds the track record right now. I believe it's a 17.2. And the cars are just getting faster. The technology, like everything else, is just getting better. So, you know, everybody's starting to learn more, and these cars are being the 16-second bracket before you know it.
That's pretty amazing to think, especially when I think of the fact that, you know, your cars are really budget-minded compared to a sprint car, and you're running laps in that same time frame, as we said, you know, with a 360 and even a 410 sprint car. I think you're getting a lot of bang for the buck in terms of what you're spending on your racing budget, you know, in comparison to those guys having to spend all that money on a 410 or 360 sprint car.
Oh, definitely. You know, the budget, the bang, everything, the speed, everything. You know, the competition is what you want to get for what you're spending. You know, and the way you do it too is you got to take care of your equipment also. If you don't want to be out there spending hundreds, thousands of dollars, don't go out there and wreck everybody every week. And take care of your stuff, take care of your tires. You can get 4 races out of your tires if you're right, if your setup's right. And you just, like you said, the bang for your buck. That's where it's at right now.
So how many laps of a main event will you guys run this coming Saturday night?
We'll be running 20-lap main events. I believe maybe 6-lap heat races. So we should have a field of close to 24 cars if we're lucky. 22 has probably been our average so far this year.
That's a pretty good car count. I mean, when you consider the fact that I've seen a lot of racing series over the past 15, 20 years kind of come and go on and off the Southern California racing scene, and you guys have really begun to just incrementally grow over the past few seasons, and I think that's very impressive.
Yeah, there's been a couple down years, and I've watched it go down, and I've also watched it come out, and right now it's thriving. You got these young kids coming out of quarter midgets, getting into some really good cars, and they're telling their friends about it. So, you guys out there wanted to get into some racing, ask somebody about a lightning sprint or mini sprints, what they call them, running 1,000 cc, 1,200 cc motors. Tell your friend about it. Come out and watch, and maybe you'll be in one of these days.
Now let me do this. Let me try to weasel my way into somebody in your series giving me a ride. I'm kind of a big guy. I'm 6'2", almost 6'3", 203 pounds. If any of your guys out there want to offer me a few laps in a lightning sprint, I'll be glad to take it. I won't bend the car. I promise to bring it back in one piece. So if you want to spread the word to your compatriots over there at the California Lightning Sprints division, I'm looking to kind of snake a few laps or two at one of the local tracks if somebody's willing to give me one.
Oh, yeah. Get a hold of me. We'll set one up.
All right. Sounds good. California, or is it KellyLightningsprints.com is the website from what I see here, KellyLightningsprints.com, if you want to find out more information on the California Lightning Sprint Division. Also, do you happen to have any kind of website, Facebook, anything, Jarrett, that fans can keep track of your racing career?
Yeah, you can follow me on Facebook at Jared Kramer, and then I'm also on Instagram at jkramer14, and then our Facebook page on the California Lightning Sprints page is what it is. It's California Lightning Sprints, and you can follow us on there. We do live feeds, Facebook live feeds for our races on our, we'll be live at, I don't know about Paris because it's 410s are running, but
right.
Most of our races are live, so you can check us out on there, and you can feel the action.
Yeah, that's what's cool. I'm glad you brought that up because I have noticed that on the Facebook page that when you guys are out running, somebody has a camera up bringing us the action. So if you want to keep track of the California Lightning Sprints, you can watch live racing video from whatever racetrack they're at throughout California and Southern California. Hey, Jarrett, thanks for joining us. We wish you all the best for this weekend. For all you fans who are headed out to Paris Auto Speedway, the gates will open up at 5 o'clock and racing will begin at 7. And the Salute to India at Paris is always a great event. And Jarrett, we wish you all the best. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you out at the dirt track.
Thanks for having me. See you there.
All right. Thank you. Jarrett Kramer, your current points leader in the California Lightning Sprints Division, joining us here on Kaotic Motorsports Radio. And hopefully that will provide some chaotic karma, if you will, that will bring Jarrett some luck and maybe grab a win or a podium. Speaking of Chaotic Motorsports karma, Christian Brooks, who's also been a past guest on the radio here, apparently came up with a victory in the Global Rally Series. Let me look up some of the information. Yeah, Chris Brooks won the GRC Lights in Kentucky over this past weekend. So some of that chaotic karma, again, coming to play into the ranks here for those of you racers who want to join us at Chaotic Motorsports Radio. Also got to give a shout out to Todd Gilliland. He was a radio guest with us a few weeks back. He is now the points leader in the K&N West Series, the NASCAR K&N West Series, and he's also running, I believe, in second place in the K&N East Series. He's trying to do the double this year, and Todd Gilliland, we got to give a shout out to him, grabbing some of that chaotic motorsports karma by being with us here on the radio. Hey, also some other events coming up this race weekend, aside from what's happening at Paris Auto Speedway. So for those of you dirt racing fans want to take in that action, I highly recommend that you head out to the pass and enjoy the dirt racing action. But down in San Diego, a little bit of drag racing, nitro racing going on with what's called the Battle at Barona. This is the second annual event that they're running at Barona. I believe you can find out some of those at baronadrags.com. I actually happened to catch last year's event that included the likes of Dale Worsham and Gary Densham, just to name a few racers there that brought out their mellow yellow race cars and put on an exhibition. I believe those two racers are going to show up again this coming weekend. Also, there will be a mix of nostalgia funny cars, some fuel alters, and some possible top fuel cars as well. So Barona Drag Strip headed down there once again. Hopefully I'll grab some interviews with some of the racers down there. What I love about Barona, it's only an eighth of a mile, so for those of you who want full quarter mile or 1,000-foot drag racing, you're not going to get it at Barona, but it's a pretty cool little venue, kind of nestled in the hills just above Ramona, El Cajon, there in San Diego County. So it's a great little racetrack that kind of reminds me a little bit of Thunder Valley in Bristol, Tennessee. Not quite as spectacular of a racetrack as Bristol, but nonetheless a great venue to watch racing. Just got about a minute or two before we head off into the sunset here, but it looks like we got another phone call. Who do we got in the line here with Kaotic Motorsports?
Hey, buddy, Cooter couldn't be here, so it's Chappie listening in. Boy, way to make us proud here at Kaotic Motorsports. Great job, Mr. J.R. Ybarra. You sounded great.
Thank you, Chap. Great to have you along with us. I know you'll be back in the saddle here at Kaotic Motorsports next Tuesday evening, where we'll get a chance to review all that's going to happen. Hey, who's your picks for this weekend for the Indy 500?
Big weekend. Let's go with Hamilton against your Vettel for Monaco. I'll go Newgarden because I just love him, and it's more of a sentimental pick. But I'll go, you can take the first two rows, 6 drivers, and I'll take everybody behind them. So there's a side bet there for a 12-pack. And then Kyle Larson at Charlotte. So there you go.
Yeah, you know, Kyle Larson, I think, is a great pick for Charlotte in terms of the NASCAR race. I'm actually going to do Keselowski on that one. So Brad Keselowski is my pick for the Coke 600. Like I said, Indy 500, if I'm going to maybe make a realistic pick, I'm going to say Scott Dixon. He's going to be really tough to beat coming off the front row.
Well, it's endurance, and I mean, it's not a bad pick, but it is an endurance race, and as you know and you talked about, you need a lot of luck. And one more shout-out for Nicky Hayden, great champion. And a great story. If anybody up and coming in any form of racing should read the story on Nicky Hayden, the Kentucky kid. He's great.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to close out tonight's program. So our thoughts, our memories, our prayers out for the Hayden family and the great memories that the late, great Nicky Hayden has brought to the motorsports world.
Hey, great job again. Thanks for filling in between UI and soon-to-be retiring John Whitlow from Double Nickel Racing. Kaotic Motorsports is only getting stronger. We appreciate all the listeners, and everybody make sure you listen to all the great shows at chaoticradio.com. Mike, the producer, great job. And Memorial Day weekend, happy Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy a big race weekend, but barbecue some dogs and burgers, but make sure you take a minute to thank all of our veterans, male or female, past or present. We couldn't do what we do unless they do what they do. So awesome.
Absolutely. I'm second on that one. Our thanks to all the men and women in uniform. Hey, thanks for joining us, Chap. We'll see you next week.
Great job, buddy.
All right, thanks. Chappie Chapman joining us on the hotline. And that's going to wrap things up for us here at Kaotic Motorsports Radio. Once again, thank you for joining us. I'm J.R. Ybarra. Enjoy yourselves this Memorial Day weekend. Watch all the racing you can. And as Chappie mentioned, remember to give thanks to all those great men and women who gave it up for us in the armed forces here. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Have yourselves a great evening.